Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host tonight, Matt Filipovitz, joined by my phenomenal co-host, Mr. Bill DeFilippo. Bill, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing okay, Matt. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I want to start off by apologizing for something I said on my solo show, where in the first little bit of the episode, I called Nolan Rucci Bryce Effner. I did correct myself in the second half, so I am a second half podcaster. So I apologize to Nolan Rucci for the confusion.
I hope if Nolan Rucci or Bryce Effner, for that matter, listen to the podcast, they will understand you're sincere in your apologies.
Yes, I am but a single man. But Bill, we won't spend too much time talking about Penn State UCLA because the other LA team, as Deshaun Foster would say, we are in LA, as is USC. The other Los Angeles-based team is on the docket for this upcoming week. Penn State travels to the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum on Thursday because there's no runway in State College that's long enough to get them out any later. Bill, off the top, there's been a lot of weird discourse about the State College Airport. Do you care at
Shut
all?
up! Shut up! Everyone, shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Stop! Stop! James Franklin was not complaining about anything. James Franklin was not complaining about how hard it is to do his job. He was saying that the State College Airport is not a big enough airport. That's it. That's it. That's it. We don't need to make anything more of this. This is something that we all know. This is something that we all know to be true about the State College Airport. It is very small, and as big and as the Big Ten is expanding west, it is going to be more difficult for Penn State football, other Penn State teams, and teams from the West Coast to make the trip into Happy Valley. That's all he was saying. He was not saying that my kids are going to lose this week because we have to drive to Harrisburg or whatever the hell that guy from The Athletic was making it out to be. All he was saying is this is one of the million things that nobody considered when conference realignment had. That's all. That's all.
I did see that guy from The Athletic, as far as I could tell, was a Michigan fan, and it's important to remind any Michigan fan that Penn State and James Franklin beat Michigan 3 out of 4 years, causing them to institute a nationwide cheating scandal. It's very important to take that in consideration. But, all right, Bill. Penn State USC. Nittany Lions going to an unranked USC after USC's loss to Minnesota. USC with 2 losses on the year, both on the road, one at Michigan and one at Minnesota. They do also hold a pretty impressive win, though, over LSU in week 1. The Nittany Lions are about a 4.5 favorite, depending on where you look. FPI, though, ESPN's Football Power Index, has the Trojans as a slight favorite at home. As far as I can tell, Bill, this is the first Penn State regular season game to happen in the Pacific Coast time. Pacific, is that what it's called? Pacific Coast time? Pacific time, whatever. Of the millennium, which I think is interesting, but it is far from their first trip to the West Coast or to that time zone. Penn State has played in 2 Rose Bowls and 1 Fiesta Bowl since 2017. So a trip they have done a multitude of times. Bill, a couple days out from kickoff, how you feeling about this game? I have a lot of agita about this game because I do think Penn State's going to go 10-2, and it was this or Wisconsin as the second game to Ohio State I thought Penn State would lose. USC put a second half beatdown on the Badgers in the Coliseum a couple weeks back. But again, this team, the USC team especially, feels like a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, I don't want to say I feel good necessarily about this game because it's happening under really unique circumstances, like you mentioned. Penn State having to travel out to the West Coast, play at it's a 3:30 kick, but it kicks off a new day, like all these sorts of things. But I think what interests me so much about this game, and it's something that my guess is. Your agenda is based on this. This USC team is not what you think it is. This USC team, when you hear USC, when you hear Lincoln Riley, you expect some very specific things in how it is going to operate and what it is going to be good at and what it is going to be bad at. You hear those things and you think high-powered passing attack, explosive passing attack. You think of high-scoring football games where you are always going to be at a major disadvantage because they just have bigger guns than you do. And I don't think that is the case with this USC thing. I think perception and reality are two very different things. And the more that you learn about the reality of this USC team, the more that I think you look at this game and go, you know what? I understand why Penn State is going into this game as a road favorite.
And I think a big reason for that, Bill, is on one hand, Miller Moss has been a very good quarterback. But the first thing I think about when I think about, he's been pretty good, Bill. Like, all things considered, he's not what Lincoln Riley offenses have had in the past. But as far as first-time starters go, I think he's been more than serviceable. And I don't necessarily think he's the reason they have 2 losses. I think that's more of a byproduct of the offensive line and a pretty paper soft run defense. You disagree?
I disagree a bit. Quarterback A, 64.5% completion, 7% yards per attempt, a touchdown to interception ratio of 2-1, a quarterback rating of 134.1. QB2, 59.9% completion percentage, 6.8 yards per attempt, a TD to interception ratio of 12.5 to 1, a 136.9 passer rating. Who are each of those respective quarterbacks?
I mean, the first one you said at a 2-1 TD to interception ratio?
A tick higher than that, but yes.
Okay, and the other one a 12-1?
Yes, again, a tick higher than that.
Okay. I'm thinking the first one's Aller, or the second one's Aller, excuse me, because he has 2, but that completion percentage feels way too low considering what Aller's been operating at. So I don't think that that's Aller. I don't know. Who are these quarterbacks, Bill?
The first quarterback is Miller Moss this season. The second quarterback is Drew Aller last season. So
okay.
I'm now going to read. I'm going to read through a couple of stats here for you.
Yeah,
this is Lincoln Riley's offenses during his time as a head coach. In 2017, he was at Oklahoma. His quarterback was Baker Mayfield. They averaged 11.7 yards per pass attempt, 5.6 yards per carry. 2018 with Kyler Murray, 11.3 yards per attempt, 6.6 yards per carry. 2019 with Jalen Hurts, 10.9 yards per attempt, 6 yards per carry. 2020 with Spencer Rattler, 9 yards per attempt, 4 yards per carry. 2021 with Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, 8.5 yards per attempt, 5.4 yards per carry. He leaves for USC in 2022. USC in 2022, Caleb Williams, their quarterback, 9.1 yards per attempt, 5.1 yards per carry. 2023, again, Caleb Williams, their quarterback, 9.4 yards per attempt, 4.8 yards per carry. This year with Miller Moss as the quarterback, USC is as the starting quarterback. Obviously, backups have gotten in, thrown a couple balls, whatever. 2024, USC is at 6.9 yards per attempt and 5.1 yards per carry. What we have seen, again, you hear USC, you think of Caleb Williams. You hear Lincoln Riley, you think of Baker Mayfield, you think of Kyler Murray, you think of guys who have won Heisman trophies under center. You think of offenses that can name their score in any game that they play. This year's USC team is averaging 30.8 points per game, not particularly explosive in the passing game. A couple more stats for you that I learned in my research for this game. USC didn't score a single point in the final 20 minutes and 47 seconds of their game against Minnesota last week. USC this year, 3 plays of over 40 yards, which is 104th nationally.
That's crazy.
USC's receivers this year, 31.5% of their contested targets are catches. Last year was 47.6%. All these numbers come from Connor Morissette of USCFootball.com. So again, I say all of this to say, you have an idea. You, dear listener, you, Matt Filipovitz, you, whomever, have an idea of what USC football is. They are not that. you have an idea of what a Lincoln Riley team is. This team is not that. So there is a need to talk about this game for what it actually is. And if you look at what USC is, it's not the kind of team. I'm not saying they're not going to win this football game. I'm not saying there's no way that they win this football game. It's very, very possible they win this football game. But you look at the teams that have given Penn State trouble over the years, it's teams that can go toe for toe with them in the talent department. It's teams that don't make mistakes. It's teams that are able to hit big plays. It is teams that have these quarterbacks who, Michigan's kind of the one exception to this, but quarterbacks who are able to stay upright and make all the throws and take advantage of literally anything that the defense gives them. And it's like, that's not really what this USC team is. It's still a very good football team. That's not really what this USC team is.
No, but again, but when the benchmark is, NFL MVP caliber players, like Miller Moss has not been atrocious. Like he's definitely not been to that level. But again, I think there's so many other problems with the way Lincoln Riley handles and builds a football team. Like quarterback is not a top 3 concern for me. If I was Lincoln Riley, like it's one of the positions I'm more concerned about, but that's more of an indictment on what I think the USC team is built like at the line of scrimmage, which we'll jump right in, Bill. We'll talk about,
Sure.
how we think this game is going to go overall. And we'll start with what do you think, Bill? You want to start with offense or defense here?
We'll start with defense. We'll start with Penn State's defense against USC's offense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. So the Penn State defense has to start fast in this game. USC's offense also starts incredibly slow, similar to how the Penn State defense is. And if the Penn State defense can go out there and get an immediate stop and force USC to not have success on their scripted drive, because I still think there's few play callers who can script a drive prettier than Lincoln Riley. If they can set the tone from the jump, I think the Penn State defense can control this game at the line of scrimmage. I feel very, very confident in that. And a big reason for that is Zane Durant. A big reason for that is Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, and a USC tackle group that frankly couldn't hold up very well against a Minnesota front that will get pushed around at times this year in the Big Ten. Bill, where's your head at here for the Penn State defense attacking this USC offense?
Yeah, so I think the way that USC's offense operates, how do I want to say? It matches up. Penn State's defense matches up pretty well against it. You look at what USC does, and where they actually have a lot of their success this season is on the ground. They are a good running team. Their top 2 running backs, Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner, have been really effective running backs this season. Marks is at 81 carries, 468 yards, 5.8 yards per attempt for 4 touchdowns. Joyner, 27 carries, 212 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. So I think I believe the strength of this Penn State defense is its run defense, its ability to win in the trenches, its ability to give opportunities to the linebackers and the defensive backs to, kind of get a guy in a phone booth and then take him down. I think that's where Penn State's defense has its most success. I mean, the things that USC does well, they're 20th nationally in yards per rush at 5.2 yards per rush. They are 9th nationally in third down percentage. They convert 51.52% of their third downs. Where they are a tricky team to figure out. I had a friend of mine look up Miller Moss's average depth of target. So basically, when you are throwing the football, how far down the field are you throwing it? He's only throwing it down the field about.
Can I guess, Bill? Wait. Oh, darn.
Average target is 7.2 yards. Average yards per is 6.9 yards, which is 76 nationally. When they complete passes, they only go for about 10.7 yards on average. USC's offense, you look at who their top receivers are: 11.1 yards per catch, 10.8 yards per catch, 12.6 yards per catch, 14.7 yards per catch, 7.6 yards per catch, 11.2, 15.1, 11.10. Again, you have the idea in your head of what Lincoln Riley teams do, and this team is a little bit different from it. They are a team that is good at running the football. They are a team that is good at kind of taking the underneath stuff in Big Ten play. Miller Moss this year, completing 61.2% of his passes for 791 yards at 5.9 yards per attempt, but which even worse than his overall number. And when you look at this what Penn State's defense wants to do, it wants to get after your quarterback. While Moss has only been sacked, I believe he's been sacked 8 times this year. He's sacked on 3.60% of his dropbacks, which is 32nd nationally. He's getting pressured about 1 in every 10 times that he drops back, which Penn State's defense should be able to take advantage of.
Isn't Penn State like the top team in pressure rate in the country, or like at least top 3?
It's something like that. Lincoln Riley knows how to scheme up open windows windows for his quarterback to throw into, and Moss is good at throwing into those windows. And I'm a little bit concerned about Penn State's linebackers having to play side to side in this game, because I don't think that is necessarily the strength of the linebacker room. But when I look at this USC team, the thing that gives me the most pause is their ability to churn out yards on the ground. And I think that is something that Penn State has been pretty good against this season, particularly when it's able to really impose itself in the trenches, which I think they're going to be able to do in this game. So it's an interesting matchup in that I think a lot of the stuff, USC's strengths are also strengths of Penn State, while USC's weaknesses are things that Penn State's defense is built to exploit.
And a big thing that I think is going to be key to Penn State being able to play up to their strength is the ability to have Jalen Reed play that lion position.
Agreed.
So I'm thinking we're going to see a ton of Dejon Lane in this game. And knowing what I know about Lincoln Riley, I would not at all be surprised if when those opportunities for them to try to get, intermediate and deep passing routes vertically, if they don't try to go after Dejon Lane. They'd be smart to. You look at this USC receiving core, their top guys, Zachariah Branch is always going to be there. Jacoby Lane is phenomenal. But Jacoby Lane, Zachariah Branch, each have 21 catches, Bill, and they're within 7 yards of each other, like total receiving yards wise. Another receiver, Hudson, 18 catches. Marks, the running back, 19 catches. Similar to how Penn State has this receiver by committee, USC does this thing as well, where there's no true alpha, and Miller, Moss, and company do a very good job spreading the ball around. So for a Penn State team that I think would be very wise to stack the box and try to stop the thing USC has been best at all year, and then force them to throw the football and bank on Abdul Carter, Amin Vanover, Denai Dennis Sutton getting home. But in the event that they don't, I'm a little bit concerned that, and a lot of it is kind of my my notion of what Lincoln Riley does offensively, that they're going to be able to find a way to hit some big plays, even though they haven't been able to do it legitimately all season long. So Dejon Lane and Zakee Wheatley are going to need to play, really impressive football games. And I thought Wheatley played his best football game last week against UCLA. So a lot to build on. Tony Rojas is going to be huge in this game. I think he's going to be asked to cover a lot of ground. You mentioned that USC is very good at finding space horizontally. Zachariah Branch hasn't, really had that many highlights this year compared to last year, but I'm terrified of him with the ball in his hands. Elliott Washington, I think, matches up really well with that, given his speed. But, Bill, you're right. Stopping the run is going to be priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4 for this Penn State team. And in the event that they get USC behind the sticks, Miller Moss has been pretty turnover prone this year.
Well, it's not just Miller Moss. It's USC's defense USC's offense as a whole. Moss has thrown 4 interceptions, but the real big problem for USC has been their propensity, Moss and others, to put the football on the ground. They've fumbled the ball 9 times, which is tied for 99th nationally. They've lost 5 of those fumbles, which is tied for 111th nationally. I think they turned the ball over 3 times last week against Minnesota, with one of them being Moss just, chucking it to the end zone while time was running out. So, as the clock was running down. So, not as big of a deal. But the reason that I find this so interesting, and part of the reason I think that their numbers have been down as a whole as a passing offense this year, is when you look at USC, when you look at what Lincoln Riley has had in his career, and what his teams have been best at, they don't have the quarterback run threat that they have had for essentially that Lincoln Riley teams just have always had. And the one time they didn't have that quarterback run, or they had a lesser version of that quarterback run that threatened Baker Mayfield, who was able to move a little bit. They had NFL guys in Trey Sermon and Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews and CeeDee Lamb and Grant Calcaterra all on their offense to be able to take some of the weight off of him. So when I look at this USC team, I see a team that has been pretty prone to turning the ball over, has not been able to find a ton of big plays, and their success has been, we're going to just churn and churn and churn, take the easy throws, take the easy yards where we can get them. And that's just kind of been it. You mentioned Zachariah Branch. I want to read a quote from Lincoln Riley because he was the guy. I think it's pretty easy to draw a similarity between Zachariah Branch this year and Nick Singleton last year, where both of them were super explosive. Both of them were super productive, super exciting as freshmen. And I'm now going to read this quote. This is Lincoln Riley on Zachariah Branch after their most recent game. He's trying really hard. He's practicing really hard. He would probably admit that he's probably guilty of just pressing a little bit. That's a little bit of an evolution of a role player to a starter. And I think Zach's had a lot of really good plays for us, which includes some great blocks. And I think he's been right on the cusp of a few more. We have a lot of confidence in him and the player he is now and the player he's going to become. He's going to stay the course. We're certainly going to stay the course with him and keep giving him opportunities. That is just straight up, like word for word, what James Franklin was saying about Nick Singleton last year. So I think my big overarching overall point when we talk about USC's offense is that outside of the fact that they turn the ball over and have been turnover prone this year, in a lot of ways, USC's offense this year reminds me of Penn State's offense last year, where they're best at efficiency.
It's never a good comparison to be.
Well, Penn State's offense last year still got them to 10 wins and still got them to wins in a lot of the games where they had a talent advantage or were, not totally blown away by the other team's talent advantage. It just caught up to them in games like this where they didn't have the guys to keep up with the other team. So I think Lincoln Riley's going to try and make life as easy on Miller Moss as possible. I think he's going to try to run the football. I think he's going to try to find easy ways to get the ball into Zachariah Branch's hands to try and make his life easier and not try to make him go out there and be a big time playmaker. I think in a couple of guys in Jacoby Lane, who is 6'4", and Deuce Robinson is 6'6", we're going to see a lot of throws to the sideline and hope that their big dudes can go up and get them over Penn State's defensive backs. But as a general thing, between the fact that Moss is an okay but not elite quarterback like Lincoln Riley has had, between the fact that they have just not had that element of a QB run game in their offense this season, and between the fact that they don't really have receivers who have broken games open when the ball gets in their hands or when they have had opportunities to make plays, and the fact that their offensive line has been a little bit suspect this year, I think this is an opportunity for Penn State's defense to go back to what we've been talking about with the perception of a Lincoln Riley offense. I think this is an opportunity for Penn State's defense to go out and kind of exercise those last bits of demons that people have from a bad first half against Bowling Green. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they do that remains to be seen. Like you mentioned, I'm a little bit worried about a true freshman safety being in there and playing a lot of football. I think guys like Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, when they get put on the field, even a guy like Tamir Robinson, who hasn't played a ton of football and is kind of still finding his footing, it's going to be, we're targeting them in every single way that we possibly can. Lincoln Riley is a coach who likes to take advantage of potentially favorable matchups, but I don't know if this is going to happen, but if we are doing this podcast on Sunday and we are talking about, wow, people are suddenly saying Penn State has one of the best defenses in the country. People are saying Penn State's defense is the best in the country, right up there with Ohio State, right up there with Iowa, because of the perception of what USC's offense is. I would not be surprised.
So, Bill, I'll go first, but let's go from here and let's talk about a guy specifically we're watching that maybe, is in an interesting schematic spot that you think has an opportunity to create some pretty big splash plays. For me, I think it's a little bit of an outside the box one for me. I thought about going Zane Durant here because I truly believe Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Amin Vanover are going to be able to get they're going to get theirs. Zane Durant, I think, is really starting to star, but I'm going to go with Elliot Washington on this front. Bill, in Big Ten play, I just did the math really quick on my phone. AJ Harris leads Penn State cornerbacks with 90 snaps so far in the season through, the first 2 games of Big Ten play. Bill, how many snaps off do you think Elliot Washington is of that?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that?
So AJ Harris leads Penn State cornerbacks in snaps through Big Ten play with 90. Elliot Washington is second, which is a surprise if you think about the guys in that room who we thought would be ahead of him this year, Cam Miller and Jalen Kimber especially. Bill, how many snaps do you think AJ Harris is at so far? Elliot Washington, excuse me.
82.
Wow, that's insane. You got it on the money. Elliot Washington is playing an absurd amount of snaps for a true sophomore who really only played special teams last year. I think Elliot Washington is going to be a guy who Lincoln Riley would be smart to go after, especially early on in the game. We mentioned Dejan Lane, but no matter what, Zakee Wheatley, there's going to be that extra security blanket back there for him. But if Penn State is going to go a lot of man, which I think they're going to be able to with how often they're going to be blitzing, Elliot Washington, number 16, is going to be a guy in the spotlight this week. So that's a guy I'm watching, and I'm going to call my shot here, Bill. I think he gets a pick in this game. I don't think it's going to be the first of his career, but I feel like Elliot Washington picks a ball off this game.
Okay, that's reasonable. And yeah, I do like the Washington pick. I think he's a really good player. I think he's probably, other than Harris, the highest upside guy in Penn State
100%.
cornerback room. And if he is able to show that, the sooner he's able to show that, the better. Because I think he, one hell of a football player. I'm going on the other side, excuse me, and taking the more negative approach and going with what I just said with DeJuan Lane, with Tamir Robinson, with Dom DeLuca, with Tyler Elston, the guys who, whether it's because, they're pretty new to this in Robinson and Lane, or the guys who, play their asses off but have physical limitations like Elston, like DeLuca, are just the guys that Lincoln Riley are inherently going to target. Because the thing is, in order to get to a quarterback, in order to pressure a quarterback, in order to get a quarterback off of his game, you need to make him do things just a split second longer than he wants to. And the defensive line, the guys who blitz, the edge rushers, the tackle, whomever it might be, they are guys who speed you up. What Penn State needs is a big game from the guys who are going to slow this offense down, who are going to make them hold on to the ball. Again, make Miller Moss hold on to the football for that extra split second that is the difference between Abdul Carter getting home or, just shoving him after he throws it. Moss is 6'1". He's not the biggest guy in the world. You have to be able to take away the throwing lanes that Lincoln Riley is going to open up for him. And I think the guys who are going to be the most important in doing that are the guys at linebacker and at safety who take the middle of the field away. Lincoln Riley loves to take advantage of how wide the college hashes are, really have his guys play these extra wide splits and put you in situations where you have to cover space because the ball is getting thrown to a guy in space. So if these linebackers, if these safeties who haven't played a ton of football or, aren't the athletic marvels that like a Tony Rojas is, are consistently in conflict, I think that's a good thing for USC. If those guys are able to play their best games, are able to slow down Miller Moss's ability to get the ball out while the defensive line is trying to speed up his ability to get the ball out, I think that's going to be a really good thing for Penn State. If not, I think USC might be able to move the ball through not for like huge plays consistently, 25-yard chunk plays over and over, but consistently enough that Penn State's defense doesn't show, isn't really able to impose itself on this game.
Bill, you kind of just made me think about a dimension of this game that we really haven't seen from the Penn State defense too often this year, and that's tip balls at the line of scrimmage. Miller Moss being 6'1", I don't think the height isn't that big of a deal for a quarterback for me. And Lincoln Riley especially. Baker's not a tall guy. Kyler wasn't a tall guy. Caleb Williams, I think, is about 6'1" too, so it's not anything new for Lincoln Riley. But that comment you had about you have a Penn State defensive backfield that's trying to slow him down. You've got a Penn State pass rush that's forcing him to speed up. I think that's probably going to lead to a tip ball or two. So if those bounce the right way, that could be a major problem for USC.
And the thing that you just mentioned with Lincoln Riley not always having the biggest quarterbacks, you go through the list. Mayfield's, somewhere between 6 foot and 6'2". Kyler might not be 6 foot. If he's 6 foot, he might be lying about that. Jalen Hurts about 6'1", 6'2". Caleb Williams, not a particularly big guy. The thing with all of them is they could either run or they were really mobile. Yep. And Moss is not bad at navigating the pocket. He's good at, for a guy who hasn't played a ton of football, he's 22 years old. He's been around USC forever. He's a really smart kid. If I remember correctly, his dad is like a famous architect, and Miller Moss is like an honor student, like really smart guy. Mm-hmm. But he has physical limitations about it. He doesn't have the biggest arm in the world. He's not the fastest and most mobile guy in the world. There is a way that Penn State is able to make his life a living hell today. On a Saturday, if they are, that's going to go a long way towards Penn State winning this football game.
Bill, I would like it if Penn State won this football game. That's just me. And when I'm watching, hopefully, a Penn State win this week, you know what I'm probably going to be rocking?
If I had to assume, it's something from Home Field Apparel.
It absolutely will be something from Home Field Apparel. Home Field is our podcast sponsor and has been so for each of the last 3 seasons. They make some of the coolest collegiate apparel in the marketplace today. I am rocking my Script Nittany Lions logo shirt I wear on almost every podcast pretty much at this point. It's one of my favorite t-shirts in their collection. Again, I love that it doesn't say Penn State. It just says Nittany Lions. I've never really seen anything else out there like it. And they really take the time to learn the history of your school. They'll comb through the archives to find unique logos, unique fonts, slap it on some merch, and make some really high quality stuff. And our listeners can get 15% off their first order with promo code RLR24. They have a great USC collection. They have pretty much every school under the sun, and they are always adding more. Again, the promo code is RLR24 for 15% off your first order. With the holidays coming up, great opportunity to get, whether it be a t-shirt, hat, crew neck, hoodie, bomber jacket, coach's jacket, pullover. Again, they have some of the best stuff in the marketplace, and we could not be happier to be continuing to work with them. So thank you to Home Field for sponsoring this podcast. And Bill, the Penn State offense. Tonight was practice. On the field were both Nick Singleton and Anthony Donko. Great place to be. This Penn State offense, I have a couple stats I want to rattle off to start. They don't really fit anywhere naturally into the flow of the show. So one thing I want to touch on at the top, a bit of a different point from my other two. I was listening to a couple of national podcasts, as I went about my day the past couple of days. And there seems to be people talking about how Penn State is still not explosive. And I kind of talked about it on my solo show after UCLA. I feel like that sentiment exists because Penn State's getting explosive plays, but they're not going for touchdowns. I mentioned last week against UCLA, all of their touchdowns were 5 yards or fewer. So when you think explosive offense, a lot of the time, you're thinking 40, 50-yard touchdowns. And frankly, that's not really been Penn State for a while. But to say they're not explosive is a pretty lazy take. Penn State is the only team in the country to have a quarterback rank in the top 5 of yards per attempt and a running back rank in the top 5 of yards per attempt. That is explosiveness, and that is balance. So saying they're not explosive to me kind of tells me you're box score watching. You're not watching the games. You kind of have what I have for Lincoln Riley, a predisposition that you're going to have to change because it's not true. So right off the bat, there's that. And Bill, for that Penn State rushing attack that really missed Nick Singleton to get explosive plays last week, USC allows 5 yards per carry, which is a full yard more than Illinois did. And in that game against Illinois, you'll remember, Bill, Penn State had 2 100-yard rushers in Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. USC is the second worst run defense in the Big Ten, ahead of only Purdue. With all that being said, Bill, I think we're in for a humongous game for Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, and maybe even a little bit of Bo Prabula. Where do you fall here?
I'm going to another quote that Lincoln Riley gave after the Minnesota game. We didn't command the line of scrimmage on the defensive front like we have in these other games. The margins there are thin. We've got to be more controlling at the line of scrimmage. And then I didn't think we tackled well at the second level. We missed a few tackles that we just really haven't been missing very often. When you combine those things, all of a sudden the runs in the first few weeks that were 1 or 2 yards, they're 4 or 5 yards. And the ones that were 4 or 5 yards, they start getting out. We've got to get back to our fundamentals. And I think an important thing to mention here is that going into this game, USC is not going to have their former blue chip defensive tackle prospect, started at Georgia, transferred to USC, Bear Alexander, who is going to be who has entered the transfer portal, redshirted, a very up and down player, but a big, nasty, physical player in the heart of their
His
defense.
ups are very up. He was part of very up.
Part of a defensive tackle rotation. And then the far more prominent thing, which is the loss of linebacker Eric Gentry, 6'6", 215 pounds, from Philadelphia, started his career at Arizona State. Before transferring to USC, he was the guy who made splash plays. He was the guy who made big plays, who just knew where to be for USC's defense throughout the season. It sounds like he's going to be, he has an injury that is going to cause him to redshirt, but that hasn't been totally confirmed yet. So
I did some research on that, Bill. It looks like he's had two concussions throughout the first month of the season. So right off the bat there, on a personal level, after what we've seen Tua go through on the NFL level, get healthy, young man. I would have loved to have seen him play. That's bigger than football when you have that happen to you twice. And to go into a game this physical, I don't, on a personal level, I do not think it's a good idea for the kid. And I just hope he gets healthy.
Yeah, well, the good news is it's, Lincoln Riley said it is a possibility that he's going to end up redshirting this season. So that is certainly worth mentioning. But when you look at this USC defense, they're really, really good on third down. Their opponents only convert 26.32% of their third downs, which is 6th nationally against them. One thing that has been noted is that their new defensive coordinator, Dan Lynn, of course, played his college ball at Penn State. Their defense is very bend but don't break-y, a la Tom Bradley when he was Penn State's defensive coordinator. They don't really get after the quarterback. Their best guy at getting to the quarterback was Gentry, who, of course, is in all likelihood not going to be playing. But they allow 6.5 yards per attempt, which is tied for 37th nationally, and 9.6 yards per completion, which is tied for 11th nationally. They're good at keeping things in front of them. Where they struggle, like Lincoln Riley mentioned, and like the stats mentioned, and like you mentioned, Matt, is they are tied for 102nd nationally at 5 yards per rush. This is a game where you and I have the exact same thought going into this. I don't think they're going to need to ask Drew Aller to win them this game, despite the fact that I think he's a talented enough guy to be able to do that. I think he'll be doing a good amount of, taking what the defense gives him with Tyler Warren, with Liam Clifford, with Trey Wallace. I think I would not be surprised if you injected James Franklin with a little bit of truth serum, you got a couple gin and tonics in him at the first one night. I don't know if James Franklin has ever been to the first. You got a couple gin and tonics into him
Is
at
that
the
your
first
drink of
one
choice
night.
at the first? A gin and tonic?
Whenever I need a drink and I can't think of anything, I get a gin and tonic. Yes.
Okay, respect.
So do that. I would not be stunned if the takeaway was Nick Singleton could have gone last weekend against UCLA. He would have been physically compromised, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. But ultimately, they knew they didn't need him to beat UCLA, and they need him to beat USC. Nick Singleton's ability to break off big plays in the running game against a rushing attack against a rushing defense that will let you rip off big plays. And it's worth mentioning another thing from practice tonight on Wednesday. Anthony Donko at right tackle also practiced after it looked like he, hurt his arm or something. And Nolan Rucci ended up replacing him.
Shoulder, I thought it was. His arm went kind of dead. It looked like, yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully it's just a stinger, but he was at practice today. You put all that together. I've had this thought, Matt. I don't know how good of a thought it is. I don't know how accurate it's going to end up being. My guess is it's a little bit off base just because USC's offense is, for how, not insanely high I am on it, still going to perform better. I would not be surprised if this game ends up feeling, from a Penn State offense perspective, a little bit like when Penn State went to Auburn.
I was gonna say that. I think I posted that same exact question in our Slack channel a couple days ago. This feels like it could easily be Penn State Auburn, which, if you remember back to that game, Sean Clifford played a really, really good game. He moved the sticks and he managed the game very effectively. There was no passing touchdowns for Cliff that game. It was all rushing. It was all Nick Singleton. It was all Katron Allen. And I think Devin Ford had a nice long run in there too. Shout out Devin Ford. Bill, I think that's a great way to kind of view this game. And I think it's a formula that's going to work very well. Yeah. But with that being said, this can be a great chance for Penn State to put Drew Aller on a national stage and let him throw a couple of the deep balls that he's thrown this year that few guys can make. And when those pop, because I think Danton Lynn is too smart of a defensive coordinator to let Nick Singleton run for 9 yards a carry every single time he touches the football. He's way too smart to let Katron Allen churn it out for 4 yards, 5 yards a carry every single time. He's going to bring safeties up. With Gentry out, there is going to be an inherent need to bring more experience from somewhere on the field into the box. You know the one guy in the Penn State passing attack I think that bodes really well for?
Amari Evans.
I think Amari Evans has 2 touchdowns in this game.
Okay.
I think Amari Evans has a very good opportunity to find open space behind the defense. And I get USC does a very, very good job of limiting big plays. With that being said, my point here was kind of going to be the Michigan game, in that Michigan probably could have hit a couple of deep balls if they had a quarterback who knew how to throw the football forward. Mm-hmm. And Aller, I think, can do that. So that's why I'm very intrigued to see if, in their quest to stop Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, if Amari Evans ends up having a career day in Southern California.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State's top receiver, whomever it ends up being on the day, has a game kind of similar to what we saw at Liam Clifford last week, where
PFF's highest graded receiver of week 6, okay, baby. Shout out Little Cliff.
Listen. I love Liam Clifford. I love Penn State football. I like when good things happen to Penn State football players. If your metric has the best receiver in the country on a given week, catching 3 balls for 107 yards and no touchdowns, I don't care how good his run blocking is. I don't care about this or this. The goal of a wide receiver above everything else is to catch the football, accrue yards, and get into the end zone. If your top receiver in the country, by whatever voodoo PFF does, goes for 3, 107, and 0, and I love Liam Clifford. I thought he had a really good game against UCLA. You should probably reconsider what you're doing. Neither here nor there. But yeah, one of those games where, like last week, Liam Clifford, again, he caught 3 balls, but he made something out of all of them. And Drew Aller threw the ball to him really well. I forget, I think it might have been his second completion to Clifford. Go back and watch that. We've been
Layered
talking
between 3 defenders.
Yeah, and like we talked about after the after the Illinois game about how Drew's ball placement was just a little bit off, wasn't quite as accurate. He threw that one so well that Joel Klatt, in the middle of Gus Johnson doing what Gus Johnson does, just goes, beautiful. Drew is starting to get locked in on that stuff in a way that I think is really, I think is going to be really good for Penn State. But again, at the end of the day, I think this game is about Nick Singleton. Again, Danton Wynn has that Tom Bradley. We're going to bend, we're going to bend, we're going to bend, but ultimately we are just not going to break thing about his defense. The way that they rally to the ball when it is thrown down the field to tackle guys is impressive, even if they weren't particularly great in the running game last week. They're a team that is going to try and force fumbles. They've forced 5 on the season and recovered 4 of them, I believe. So that's the stuff that I'm going to be looking out for that. But I think Penn State's going to be able to move the ball on them. I think Penn State's going to be able to find the end zone. And I think between, like you mentioned, safeties creeping up and hitting them over the top, and just the fact that Nick Singleton is Nick Singleton, there are going to be opportunities here for Penn State's defense to cook up some big plays. Penn State's offense to cook up some big plays. Apologies.
I gotcha. So same question as defense. Give me an offensive player you're watching who you're just think is in an interesting spot. And I'll go first. And I think this player is the most fun part of the Penn State offense right now, which is crazy.
You're going to say Vega.
It's going to be Vega. I think what Andy Kotelnicki is doing with Vega is so much fun. And one thing I don't want to get lost in this, Vega is one of the rare West Coasters to come to Happy Valley. I have to imagine this is a great opportunity for him to play in front of people who don't normally have the ability to watch him play in person. Again, I don't know if Vega has a big family contingent there, but if there's ever going to be a game, this is it. So I am very curious to see how Vega Ioane, big number 71, plays in this kind of game where he is going to be able to maul dudes and where I think Andy Kotelnicki is going to find a way to put him in interesting schematic spots. So Vega is my guy I'm watching here.
Yeah, I was going to say Drew Shelton, Vega Ioane, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, Anthony Donko, Cooper Cousins, and Nolan Rucci. JB Nelson to whatever extent JB Nelson gets in. I think
JB Nelson did practice, by the way. I know he was dinged up. He was at practice tonight as well.
Yeah, cool. I'm paying big attention to how Penn State does in the trenches, because if they push a UCLA front that hasn't been able to get to the quarterback, hasn't been able to make those sorts of big splash plays in the back end of a defense or in the offensive backfield. I'm trying to do a quick Google search right now for where UCLA ranks nationally in total tackles for loss. They have, 23 tackles for loss this season, which is tied for 105th nationally. So Penn State's offensive line is going to have an opportunity to really impose itself in this game, in the running game and in the passing game. And if they do that against a front that is going to go into this game outgunned, I think it bodes really well for Penn State's offense.
All right, Bill. I can't wait another second. It's prediction time. I have no idea, as I'm sitting here at 6:03 on Wednesday, how I want to lean for this game. There's a lot of ways I'm thinking about this can go. You mentioned 2022 Auburn. Bill, I think this game is either 2022 Auburn for Penn State or Penn State loses by 3. I think it's either one of those two. I don't see a scenario plays out any different than that. Bill, do you want to go first for your score prediction?
Sure. So one thing that I find pretty interesting about this matchup is that Penn State and USC have played 5 times in history in California, and USC has won every single one of them. In 1923, USC won 14-3 in Pasadena. In 1990, USC won 19-14 in LA. 1991, USC won 21-10 in LA. And of course, 2009 and 2017, both of those games in the Rose Bowl, USC won them. The two teams actually did play in Tempe, Arizona in 1982, and Penn State won that game. Penn State has not beaten USC since 1996. 2000 USC won 29-5, and then of course the two in New Jersey, and then of course the two Rose Bowls. I do think USC doesn't match up especially well with Penn State. I think that USC, while a good football team, one thing that I think a lot of Penn State fans have talked about coming into this season, and one reason why I think Penn State fans are really excited about the way the Big Ten is now organized, is the way that it has worked is that Penn State plays two of the best teams in the country in Ohio State and Michigan. Then Penn State plays garbage from the rest of the Big Ten East, and then garbage from the Big Ten West. And it just wasn't especially great. USC, I think, is firmly in right now that like middle class of the Big Ten that has Penn State fans excited about more games being close, more games being competitive, all of that. I'm interested in the travel out there, how Penn State handles going out to the West Coast to play a game for the first time since that Rose Bowl against Utah. I'm very interested in how USC looks coming off of a really tough loss to Minnesota. But at the end of the day, this is the best team that USC has played. This is for my money, the second best rushing attack that they have played behind Michigan, the best quarterback that they have played, the second best group of pass catchers that they have played besides LSU, and the best defense that they have played. I think when Penn State's offense and USC's defense are on the field, Penn State has an advantage. When USC's offense and Penn State's defense are on the field, Penn State has the better unit. On both of those sides, I think Penn State has the better unit. Bill Connolly has Penn State winning this game by 9 points. I actually think it's might be right on the verge of winning. Yeah, Penn State winning by 8.7 points. Las Vegas has Penn State as a 5-point favorite, and 89% of the bets in this game are on Penn State covering a 5-point spread. With saying all of that, I think Penn State wins this game. I think USC puts up one hell of an effort after what happened last week and how big this game is for them, both in terms of their perception of the Big Ten and nationally. But I think Penn State is able to pull away because of Nick Singleton and because of their ability to be better in the trenches on both sides of the football. Give me Penn State winning this game 31-21.
Wow. Okay. Bill, I have our friend Parker Flemings. Did we really get beat that bad graphic in front of me?
Okay.
So the worst beatdown here of last weekend was Tulane over UAB. So as always, shout out to Trent Dilfer. Bill, do you know the most shocking loss according to his numbers, what it was?
Was it Minnesota beating USC? It
was Minnesota beating USC. The odds of that win happening were incredibly low. So we are and again, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. Like, I totally get that perspective of it. Like, if isn't what happens. But I think that this USC team is closer to a top 10 team than it is an unranked team at the end of the season. I think that's fair to say. I think that they're good enough to get there. The travel, the lack of a dumb loss for Penn State in quite a long time.
Well, here's what I'll say. Here's just one way I'll
I'm really torn on this. Like,
again, I don't think this would be a dumb loss if Penn State lost it.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I think when you look at a dumb loss, you look at Penn State losing to Rutgers, or you look at Penn State losing to Maryland, or losing to Northwestern, or something like that. This would be a loss to a team that is not as good as them, but is not super far away. Like, not super far away from them. Penn State, I think, is something like 7th or 8th in SP plus. USC is 25th in SP plus. This is not like a garbage football team.
No, it's not.
This would be the kind of loss that this new era of college football has more of, but it doesn't necessarily just like outright end your chances of doing anything during the season. Like if Penn State loses this game, like I wouldn't be stunned by it like I would have if they lost to UCLA last week or they lost to Illinois 2 weeks ago. There's a very real path where Penn State loses this game, where USC basically holds on to the football, runs the ball like crazy, keeps Penn State's offense off the field, tires out Penn State's defense. When Penn State's offense is on the field, they just keep getting into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 situations and kick. Like all that stuff is possible. I just don't think that's going to happen because styles make fights, and this is a fight that Penn State is better positioned to win.
USC 27, Penn State 21.
Okay.
And if it was a pie chart, 51% of it is the 27-21 thing. The 49% of it is like Penn State 38, USC 14. But with how insane the season has been, like, dude, Vandy beat Bama, unranked Arkansas beat Tennessee, and I get that that doesn't really matter, but I always want to make sure I always respect the chaos that can be in college football, and this feels like a prime recipe for chaos against a USC team that, frankly, I don't think Lincoln Riley is, a top 5 coach even in the Big Ten, but he's not a joke. So USC 27, Penn State 21. I think the Nittany Lions take their first loss of the year in Southern California.
Well, the thing is, our job is not to predict chaos. Our job is not to predict the stuff that we don't know. Our job is to look at this game and go, this, and this. And when you do that, Penn State is clearly the better team. Now, if your gut says for whatever reason that Penn State loses this game, totally respect that.
I do fear, and maybe that's a really good point, because the line feels very similar to like the Penn State West Virginia line that was far too close for like anybody with any kind of self-respect to believe West Virginia was capable of covering that spread. I don't know why. I just have a feeling that this is a little bit different than that, and I can't really put my finger on it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that is your prerogative. But yeah, I think, yeah, all I will say is that if you look at Penn State over the last couple of years, pulling up the schedule right now, there. Okay. There and there. Okay. Just checking one more thing. Yes. I don't believe that I have predicted a Penn State game wrong. That wasn't the bowl game last year because a bunch of guys sat out over the last however many years, because my thing is that you just look. Everyone always says football games are played on the field. They are not played on paper. But you can look at a piece of paper and get a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in a football game. And I just think when you look at what is going to happen on the piece of paper, again, maybe Drew Auer throws a couple of picks that are just very uncharacteristic for him. Maybe Penn State's defense, they really suffer because DeJuan Lane is not KJ Wiss. Maybe all these things happen, but I'm not looking at the maybes here. I'm looking at what is presented to me, and based on what is presented to me, I think Penn State wins this game.
Yeah, and Bill, again, I'm like so close to being right there with you, dude. Like I'm so torn between this close loss or a Penn State blowout, but I don't know. I just got this feeling about it. It doesn't feel right. So we'll have to wait and see. Bill, anything else you want to hit on before we send the folks off into their weekend?
No, I got nothing. Just going to be just excited for 3:30 p.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be great with the CBS horns and everything like that. I think it's going to be an absolute showcase. And it's cool that it's on the same time as Red River. Gives us something to flip to during commercials. If you're traveling to the game, if you're going out to LA, travel safe, enjoy, have a great time enjoying the beautiful weather. I was just out there a couple weeks ago, and I cannot say nicer things about Southern California. It is legitimately outstanding and perfect.
Just one thing: if you're going to Southern California, and you want to get a really good meal, you want to get like one of the best burgers that you're ever going to have in your entire life, find where the local In-N-Out is and go somewhere else, because In-N-Out is the most overrated thing in fast food.
That's so brutal. In-N-Out not a sponsor, and they probably won't be.
No, we will not take money from them. Put that money towards figuring out how to fix your goddamn French fries. Those things are ass.
I have no comment. I never had it before. All right, Bill.
Sucks.
It's bad. All right, Bill is out on In-N-Out, and I am out on the Nittany Lions, keeping up their undefeated season. Bill has Penn State with a comfortable win. What'd you have it at, Bill? 34-24?
31-21.
31-21. I have Penn State falling USC 27, Penn State 21. I hope I'm wrong. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like button, jump in the comments, talk about the Penn State game with other Penn State fans. If you're a USC fan visiting, hello. I've never been to the Coliseum, but I saw it on the highway a couple weeks ago and it looked very nice. And be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube as well. If you're out there on Twitter, be sure to follow us at RLR Blog. I think, Bill, both you and I are watching from our couches this weekend, so I'm sure that means we will both be firing off very dumb tweets throughout the course of a college football Saturday, which is always fun. And as always, use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off your first order from our friends at Home Field Apparel. For my co-host, Bill DeFilippo, I'm Matt Lipowitz. Take care, everyone, and go State.